you have them as part of the hierarchy when they're visible on earth, carrying out the wishes of the council, and as demon spirits, those which are not in the abyss. Those, and there are some in the abyss. They're called the terrible ones, as Ezekiel 32 talks about, in the cells along the sides of the abyss, as it's described. They're the ones talking to Pharaoh in that prophecy. Have a great series on that if people want it. It's quite eye-opening for people, believe me. And so they are at the top of the physically created ones as demigods, right? Just as the demigod is understood in ancientology as the offspring of a god or a goddess and a human male or a human female, right? Same thing that happens in Genesis 6, just as Poseidon marries Clydo to create 12 demigod Atlantean kings, or Hercules is the son of Zeus by I think it's Alchemy or Alchemy, depending on how you want to enunciate the C in that word. So they're at the top of that second tier. And then below that are something called the elementals. And I cover 3 of those groups in the book. And then in the second book, I'll cover off the 4th group as well.
Oh, okay.
So the 3rd group are the little ones. So when you hear about fairies, for example, and there's all different kinds of fairies, whether or not they're brownies or leprechauns, or there's many of them, but they split into 3 groups. And they split in the same groups in all continents, in all cultures around the world, probably Antarctica, once we figure out what's down there. And so they have mischievous ones, which are like leprechauns, and part of the trickster sort of spirit of gods. And you have the good-looking ones, like Tinkerbell, for example, in Peter Pan, the nature god, in the nether world or the underworld, where they're immortal. I mean, no worrisome allegories there, but I digress. And then you have the ugly ones, like hobbits, like dwarves, like trolls, and like the Greys. And the Greys are, as it was what they're called in fairy lore, as the Grey neighbors or just the Greys. They kidnap people, have flying machines that come through portals, fairy mounds, fairy dolmens. Dolmen is a word that means portal. Come from another dimension, kidnap people for a fortnight, do all sorts of sexual experimentation on them, return them without memory. They're looking to improve their DNA so that, because their DNA is degrading, probably similar issues to what the Rephaim had on a fertility issue basis, and they're trying to get human DNA so that they can continue to reproduce. I put 2 fairy abductions in my book, in the first book, that if you didn't know it was a gray alien abduction, you would swear you're reading a gray alien abduction. Disembodied spirits are disembodied because they're counterfeit spirits, and they're not permitted to go to sleep like humans are until the resurrections, and they're not permitted to go to heaven. As Jesus said, they're like thirsting, and because they're in dry places, and to rest and to interact physically in the world, they need to possess an oikotarian, which is a soul and a body. And there's 3 parts: spirit, soul, and body. And so they're going to suppress the host. And then the 4th, each of those types of little ones in their 3 categories all have a specific role. So for example, and you see some of this in some of the literature and entertainment. So, like dwarves, they made the weapons of the gods and the demigods, and they lived in the earth and in the mountains. Gnomes, which the Greys come out of, they held the genealogies. They kept the genealogies. They kept the technology of the gods and the demigods. And they are, as I said, they're the same ones same group that will produce within that gnome group, the Greys. So that's just as a sort of a quick example, but they all have a specific role. Trolls, they're under bridges, they're in caves, they guard portals, as is one of their jobs. And then the 4th group is a salamander group. And they have 4 groups that matches up with the occult, 4 sort of elemental things in earth, like air, fire, water, And the salamanders are reptilian beings, and they are larger than humans, and they are larger than the elementals, which are all small. The noble elf, the white elf, like they're show up in the Lord of the Rings, that's like the Shea people. That's like the Tuatha De Danann. Those are giants. That's why they're shown bigger than in the Lord of the Rings, and they were the actual giants. They had pale skin. They're depicted with red hair and blonde hair, blue eyes and green eyes in the Lord of the Rings. Those are Rephaim and Nephilim people as they're depicted, of course, operating with the little people, right? In everything. And so you have the salamanders who are reptilian that are higher up than the elementals. And so that's kind of the hierarchy that I've been able to research in a nutshell. And I'm not sure how the salamanders come about, but if you buy into the notion that possibly fallen angels saved some of their creation, like the Nephilim, like the little people, as opposed to second incursion, which again I tend to lean more towards you have a situation where you have another being that one wonders was also saved, and that would be the serpent. That's the Nahash, as the Hebrew word is, that deceived Eve, who then convinced Adam to eat from the apple of the tree. And it's the Nahash that is punished. Some people think that was Satan. Satan may have been coaching. He may have been using it as his avatar, but it is only the Nahash, the serpent, that is punished. Satan doesn't go to the abyss for violating the laws of creation to create Cain, as the serpent seed goes. He doesn't have his legs taken off. He doesn't have his arms taken off. He doesn't have his speech taken away. He doesn't have his intelligence taken away, and isn't forced to crawl on the ground. He still is, as we see him reporting in Job, to God in heaven, because he's
going to and
fro, and he's been offered a stay to be a tester of humankind for a time. But he will be dealt with. He will go to the abyss, and then he will go to the lake of fire, like the other angels. So, if you understand that and connect those dots, it's perhaps possible that fallen angels in the earth, off the earth, somehow, some way, saved some of that walking, talking, intelligent serpent.